Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
This is the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. It's how Geelong spends Saturday morning. Rob Cameron is the other voice that you've been hearing. My name's Neil Butler, but this bloke, the one I'm pointing at here, his name is Mike Menna, a radio professional for years. Looking at him, he must be lots and lots of years. That's not fair. Because he said he started when he was young. Mike Menna, welcome to the studios of 94.7 The Pulse.
Thank you very much. First time on the radio in Geelong for many years, actually.
Yeah, well, it's been the first time we've been on radio for, what must be, in his case, about 3 days. You remember Eddie Everywhere? We've got Robbie Everywhere. Yeah, so.
Don't be silly, Neil.
So we were just having a quick chat while we were listening to Sam Brown. Tell us a bit about where it all started.
It all started many years ago at Mother and Father's house in Balwyn. We used to get an old tape recorder out and play records onto the tape recorder. Neil Pitney and Who Needs It? Neil Pitney, is that right?
That'd be Gene Pitney.
Gene Pitney. I'm getting old,
yeah.
And I haven't got a script in front of me. And we used to back announce it, many times for a couple of hours. And then eventually it just went on and on and on. And I was lucky enough. My father knew Wally Chamberlain at 3XY back in the 60s, and Wally Chamberlain is a very famous chief engineer. Every second word was a swear word. Absolutely amazing, and a wonderful guy. And Dad knew him, so I was lucky enough to score a job at 3XY. First job in there was cleaning cassettes or cartridges with eucalyptus oil to get the sticky stuff off it, and then the second job that came up was recording music for Aki and Jackie on their time in XY. Then progressed to into the cartridge department, putting all the ads onto cartridges for the announcers to play on air. Then a friend of mine, Frank Avis, who used to be at XY, of course, then 3MP, and then into Sydney. I scored a job with him on the traffic cars at 3XY, doing traffic reports, and a helicopter as well, in Bill Ackfield's helicopter. Then into production, and then one day Mr. Wood, one of the guys there at 3XY, came up to me and said, "Look, we know you want to do announcing." He said, "The only way for you to do announcing is you're fired." So off I went. I was fired. At that stage, I'd been going to Lee Murray's School of Announcing, and I scored a job then at 3AK in production, also panel operating for Grant Lee Dee, and some funny stories about that. Grant Lee Dee, Philip Brady, and so on. I stayed there for about 8 months, and then was lucky enough to score first announcing job at 3YB.
And of course, for those listening down in Warrnambool, that's your hometown. As in their hometown.
Their hometown, yes.
Yeah.
Mike, with the benefit of hindsight, was Dad really looking out for your best options as a career, or was he just happy to get you out of the house because you're annoying the crap out of him?
I think he thought I was mad getting into radio, and I think he turned around a bit, because he used to listen to me quite a lot. It's just one of those things. I think back in those days, radio was all announcers were a little bit risque, so to speak. It's. But we survived, got on. So
yes, and of course, when your father was listening to you, my late father, who passed away in May, he had been handed a mobile phone and a texting service. So we would be sitting here broadcasting, and we'd get, "Tell Dennis Walter that I listened to him on 3AW," or "Tell this bloke, I don't think that's the right answer." So you didn't have text messages coming through giving you a commentary on your performance.
Oh no, we used to get the phone calls every. When I was on air at 3KZ, you get phone calls from listeners telling you what to do and what not to do, and also the Les Heil, the general manager of 3KZ back in those days, especially if I was filling in for breakfast from Peter Van, who, if you go on leave, I'd fill in for breakfast, and at a minute to wait, you used to have a Western Star commercial, had to go to air at a minute to wait, which is a bit of a problem because it was only 30 seconds long, and you had to fill in for 30 seconds up to the 8 o'clock news, and if you missed it by a second, Les Heil would be on the phone.
Yeah.
And yes, Mr. Heil, yes, Mr. Heil. All that. But those were the days. You got on.
So, Mike, across your career, did you vary in how you broadcast? Were you pretty much a music presenter, or did you go into a bit of interviewing or talkback?
I never did talkback. My like is music. It's easier, I think. How can I put it? In my thing in radio that I've done, top 40, I've also done beautiful music, and I also remember when I came back to Melbourne from overseas, I worked at 3AK for a little bit, and that was when there was time for beautiful music. And I was on 3AK the last week of beautiful music, and Bill Howie said, you must do a shift in beautiful music before we change format to adult contemporary, and that was very weird because introducing Matt Avani and Percy Faith, and you've got enthusiasm, and you can't have enthusiasm. It was the same when I had a stint at 4BH in Brisbane. When I did come back from overseas, actually went into 3AW where I worked once, and they got me a job up there at 4BH, which was a beautiful music station. And I was given drive, and I lasted a week.
Yeah, I was subject to 3AK beautiful music through my growing up years when everybody else at school was talking about Ted Mulry Gang, and I'm best I could give you was James Last.
What's been intriguing this morning is the names that you've just dropped in conversation that you've worked with. Names that I've forgotten about them, but I remember listening to those names quite regularly.
There's one, we go to a function, well, I go to a function, plus a lot of guys I used to work with twice a year, the Survivors Club, which meets in South Melbourne, and it's all old radio announcers, TV presenters and so forth go, and we meet up for over a lunch, and that is fascinating because it's people, and I remember Dan Webb, who's no longer with us. I remember years ago when I was in very, very small and lying in bed listening to 3DB. At night time, you'd have Dan Webb on the radio, and there I am sitting with Dan Webb in the Survivors' lunch. And this guy, you're still in awe about these people. It's like Philip Brady and the same.
Was it like that for you? Because we have had in this studio recently Ian Cover sitting in that chair, Ross Stevenson on the telephone, and I'm sitting here like a little school kid, completely thinking, what is going on?
Yeah.
Did you like it for you, those names?
Yes, you looked up in awe at them. It's. I guess if you enjoyed radio, if you liked radio, and you wanted to get back into radio, wanted to get into radio in those days, they were who you listened to. Like your Don Lunds and your all those people.
Him, yeah.
You turn on the radio in the car, turn it up loud. Even still now, not so much with radio these days, but I know when I get into the car and up the radio with Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, love it. My wife goes absolutely mad, but still.
Not on Saturday mornings, of course, because you're generally tuned to 94.7 The Pulse, listening to the Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show. The name that rings a bell, and I suspect he would have been there at the same time as you, and you go back to your earliest memory of 3KZ was the station I listened to when I was growing up in my sort of pre-10 years, and a bloke called John Bright, who used to, I think, do mornings,
he did.
And he had an evening show once a week where he would go to a school and not go to a school, as in, Donvale High School would be the featured school, and kids from the school would request songs, I think on a Tuesday night.
I'm not too sure. That probably was bit before my time doing that, going to schools, but Brighty was doing mornings with the request program, which had to fill in sometimes for that. But he was a wonderful guy, and for a story about him that he unfortunately got fired from 3KZ
to go and become an announcer.
Then he went to 3AK, but the only way he found out he was fired was on a plane flying up to Brisbane. His wife then was an air hostess who told him, "I think you've been fired." And he and Les Heil never spoke after that, and they were great friends, which is rather a shame. But a lovely guy, actually. Yeah. Lovely guy.
Influences, you talk about going to the Murray School of Radio, which seemed to be a bit, talking to people who'd been there, a bit one-dimensional. This is the way you do it, the present. But if you're a great listener of radio, there'll be a lot of different styles that you heard.
Yes.
Who were some of the influences outside of the Murray School? This is the way it has to be done. Because I can tell by your voice you would have been a star pupil at the Murray School.
Plus a few others. I don't know. I haven't got the foggiest idea about that.
So you're probably subconsciously influenced, perhaps?
Probably yes, I'd say so. Yeah, definitely. I could never impersonate Don Lunn, boop-a-doop, and all that sort of thing. You could never do that.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to come up with your own style.
Yeah.
Well, we've been accused of that, haven't we?
We have
Style is probably stretching it a little bit. So, I mean, again, my age group is, I'll be respectful and say slightly younger than you guys, but 3XY, hot hits, 1420, then 1422 through the 70s. You had the Greg Evanses and the Lee Simons and the Barry Bissells and that kind of thing. To me, that was kind of where radio changed a bit and it became very personality focused. Would that be fair?
I was at 3XY when they were National First 50, before National First 50 albums. Then they went to National First 50 albums, and one day Ray Woods walked up to me and said, I want you to do a promo, to record a promo, put it together. And because we're going top 40. And I thought, what do you mean we're going top 40? He said, we're going top 40 in a couple of weeks' time, and we're going to call it Happening 3XY. And I thought, well, it's a bit strange. And that was the days when Paul Connick and Jeff Warden were at 3UZ. And I remember seeing a little note on the notice board outside the production department that Paul Connick and Jeff Warden will be joining 3XY in so-and-so date. And I thought, that's why leave 3UZ to come to 3XY? Very strange. But that was the day that when we first went top 40 with people like Laurie Bennett, who was a wonderful, wonderful guy. Miss Laurie a lot. Laurie Bennett, Johnny Young, and quite a few others. And we rocked on. And then then it changed in the early 70s with Greg Evans and so forth. A lot rockier than what we were. But they were the days. That's when radio was radio. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lee Simon was probably the one who I can remember being the first time where I turned on to listen to Lee Simon. The music was second. Before it was always about the music. You didn't really hear the presenter, but he was the first one to me that went above the music.
Those were the days you had to say 3XY, g'day, which I can never do. It's not me. But no, there were people like Laurie Bennett and Peter Grace, and that they were good days. So.
Yeah.
So you've obviously worked with a lot of people who have had amazing radio voices. I've got one in my head that I think is just the best radio voice. You and I have both worked with him in different locations. Who's the best radio voice that you've listened to? The one that you could listen to, quote, read the telephone book out.
Oh, golly, there's probably so many, and all different styles. Your Paul Connicks, your Jeff Wardens, Philip Brady. It just depends. It depends the mood you're in. I think who you want to listen to.
It's a fellow that, Rob, you may not know, but Mike and I have both presented on the same radio station. In fact, we had shows on the same day on 94.1 3WBC up in Melbourne, and that's where we got to know one another. There was a bloke who did a program on our station as well, a guy called Mike Lynch, who had a reasonable radio voice. He newsreader in your time at 3KZ?
No.
Oh, okay. He is just got the best radio voice that you ever... He was a newsreader and is now doing stuff on Air Radio News. Now I think based in New Zealand doing funeral stuff, like as in he's a funeral director.
Yep.
But just the most smooth, extraordinary voice. Look it up at some stage.
Yeah,
it's just an amazing voice.
I can't remember taking too much notice of the voices unless you turned on to the ABC, and it was all
different.
That was different. That was a culture unto itself, and that was getting back to the Lee Simon thing, breaking away from that and making it about personalities, as you said. The music was secondary, but it was very mundane, boring, consistent. Even the blokes, my earliest radio memories of listening to the cricket, the Alan McGill, this cultured delivery, and that's what you just got used to.
The ABC has certainly changed. They can't pronounce anything.
And good morning to Jacinta and Brian who listen to this program. We won't name names beyond that. Hey, the other thing that crosses my mind, of course, that was back in the days when they were getting the telegrams from England, wasn't it, when you were listening to the cricket, and they would knock the desk with a pencil to make it sound like that. Yeah,
that's right. I remember those days.
You'd be quite old then. You'd be a lot older than me then, wouldn't you?
Oh, he's a lot older than everybody. He's actually he's doing remarkably well for a man of 120 years of age. But I guess these days radio is a different animal, and the concept of being a broadcaster seems not to be important anymore. What went wrong?
It's the accountants. Accountants are the big problem. I think they want to make money, and they change. I mean, you've got a lot of radio stations which were great, that accountants have taken over, and they say, right, that station, for example, a station I used to work with in the UK, Swansea Sound for South Wales. A great station. It was Welsh at night time, from 7 o'clock until 10 o'clock at night. Accountants took it over. That station is now all comes out of Birmingham, and it's I think they have about one show a morning. Which is breakfast out of Swansea. And accountants ruin it. They've ruined a lot of radio stations.
Well, to be fair, probably people thought it was static with the of the Welsh language. They might have thought it was static on the line.
It's a wonderful language. I can't speak it actually. I did drive at Swansea Sound and trying to do ads and pronunciations of some.
Just opposite the railway station there, down to the
at Llanelli and Gorsinan, but a wonderful part of the world. Much different than England.
I think accountants have ruined a lot of things in society where nothing is more important than the bottom line. And it's very sad because we've lost a lot of things. And I know the younger folk might look at people of our vintage and say, oh, come on, move on, it's different. But it's not necessarily better different.
True. I mean, now when I get in the car, I get the iPad out or iPod and listen to music, and that's it. I don't tune to the radio anymore.
Except on Saturday mornings.
Except on Saturday mornings, because no one has any talent. Or a lot of radio stations will play 5 tracks in a row. And that's the same. If you listen to that same hour the next day or 2 days later, it's the same music because their playlists are running about 60 or 100 tracks per the week. And on my computer at home, I've got about 70,000 tracks. Because I do an internet radio show in Wales, and not an internet radio show. It goes to air every Sunday night, and I put the program together.
I suppose it's a loose comment. Where's the next lot of radio talent come from? Because the opportunities that are missed now when you hear, say, Gold 104, the breakfast show, repeated through the day and right across the weekend, repeated word for word, just a recording of what happened Monday to Friday. You think, well, there's an opportunity for the next presenters missed because the accountants say, no, this works, it's cheaper, let's just do that.
Well, it's cheaper. Like when I was at 3YB and a lot of other country stations, you had 7 or 8 announcers. Now there's might be 1 on 3YB or 2, because they take shows from other parts of the country. But we always, Survivors Club, always talk about, wouldn't it be great to start off another radio station like 3XY or 3KZ, and you play music, and you play 1 track, back announce, forward announce, commercials, not like this 8 tracks in a row, a bank of commercials, and have no talent. Get on there and just really enjoy. If you listen to community radio, a lot of people, the old announcers that get on, do really well because they're enjoying it.
Yeah. Yes, you don't do this because you're getting paid, so therefore you must be doing it because you're enjoying it. Maybe he doesn't listen on Saturday mornings because he's quite keen on talent.
Yeah.
So he may not be listening into the program. And you did a stint at 3GL?
Yeah, 3GL. I was there when I left the UK, came back, and was over 3GL for about a year with Don Dwyer and Ken Henderson, Gary Newton.
Because Gary lives locally, doesn't he, as well?
Yes, he does, yep. And he barracks for that team as well.
Can't win them all, can you?
Okay, true. And then from there, left after a year and went to 7LA Launceston for a year, and then got sick of talking to myself in a dark room, and came back to Melbourne and then joined Qantas. So had about 20 years at Qantas, but in that time also did freelance for 3AK, 3AW, and a few other odds and ends community radio. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just been great to have you in the studios here. It's as we've had several times, having professionals in the studio is always good.
Studio guests are a lot better than telephone guests. That's not casting, not casting dispersions of
and not quality wise necessarily. Just for those who now will no longer talk to us on the radio.
It's a much better conversation.
Yeah. So thanks for coming in and having a chat to us.
That's
and for folk who do want to have a listen to the Mike Menner Show, clever name for the program, isn't it? The Mike Menner Show.
Yeah. 95. What is it? 95.1, I think. No, that was 3WBC.
Yeah, well, 94.1 was
105.1 Radio Teacoid every Sunday night in Wales at 10 o'clock or Melbourne time at 7 o'clock on Monday morning.
and they would find that on the web by going to...
Just Radio Ticoed. Just if you put Radio Ticoed, TIRCOED.
Okay,
and-
TIRCOED.
Yeah, and you'll find that every Sunday morning.
Monday morning our time. Yeah, okay. Mike Menner, thanks for coming in and
That's
having
right.
a chat to us, and we will continue to hear your dulcet tones on the wireless, albeit we have to go to Wales to do so.
Yeah, and did I pass the audition?
Very much so.
Well, we'll have to ask the question, won't we? Leo sometimes listens to our program, typically with his head in his hand shaking, but we'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do any shift. It's all right.
Excellent. All right.
Good man.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Menner there, former presenter on about 4,000 radio stations.